Once we have the fundamentals under our belt, we can embrace taking on a more ambitious undertaking. We have this application that we'll create we're calling Yelp Explorer. Note the spelling there. The application's goal is to allow a traveler, say for perhaps the purpose of teaching, to visit a city and be able to investigate certain business types that they might take advantage of in that city, like parking or hotels or restaurants or even laundry. So what we have here is a layout provided in our application here. It's a more complex layout using the border layout. This also is a universal application, by the way. We're currently looking at the classic implementation of it. So we have a banner display of our application title at the top here using a graphic. Below that we have a toolbar, which is a container for panels that can allow for anything from buttons to combo boxes to text fields. We have text fields here that already have pre-populated through binding a certain location and a certain category of business for that location. Below that we have a tab panel with 3 tabs, each of which have a different means by which they're rendering the current display of the location and the business, and will re-render according to any other choices that we might make through those text fields. So as I decide to switch from Toronto, Ontario to say Monte Carlo, and instead of restaurants, I can choose to look into hotels. The data feed that's being accessed here is being done dynamically. There's 2 feeds being accessed here, the Google Maps API, of course, and once that location is made, a Yelp call is made for businesses according to that latitude and longitude. The data feed, therefore, is being generated dynamically. Here's a sample of what that is. So the businesses that get returned, by default all 20 of them, correspond to whatever latitude and longitude were retrieved in the initial feed by typing into that first location text field. As a result, a model is responsible for determining aspects of how many businesses are returned and how we massage the data once it comes in from that feed to best serve the application's purposes. Once that data is retrieved, you can access it through a map on this first tab. You can do the same thing with thumbnails from a data view on this second tab, and you can do the same with records in a grid through this third tab. The grid in particular, in one of the columns, implements a UX widget, and that allows for dynamic rating of a particular business type, potentially for the purposes of sending that back to Yelp to record the satisfactory of an experience. What is also useful is binding is being used to make a selection from either a marker on the map, a thumbnail on the data view, or a record on the grid to enable a detail panel off to the right, or what the border would allow you to say is off to the east. Information from that record, whether it's from the view or the map or the grid, will be implemented by a binding. And certain information for that record is present from Yelp, like a rating is being used to implement a certain image you might use. The title is bolded. We're providing a Yelp link back to their website at the bottom here. And making a different selection, you'll see that through binding, that current record is highlighted. So if I were to switch to, say, La Différence as a hotel in Monte Carlo, that shows up through binding in the detail panel and is also appropriately highlighted in the grid panel through binding and a marker on the map through binding. Also on the detail panel itself, if you wish to do an edit to that record, in the toolbar on the detail panel, we provided means where a window is providing a modal view of a form embedded in that window, where again you can choose to override the title and override the rating of what was provided initially by the feed. So if I decide La Différence should be called La Différence 2, then you may see behind there that that binding is being maintained behind us in the detail panel. If that rating was just exquisite and should be 5 stars instead of 4, by saving this, I can return now and see that those 5 stars have been maintained. The new title is recorded in the detail panel, and through binding, that can also be seen in the title in the grid, as well as the live rating here, and that being the new name in the thumbnail or in the map. Also, as an advanced topic that we include in the training is the idea of using routing. EXT provides what's called a single-page application by default, is how the app is generated. Many who operate an application will want to be able to use the browser's back button in order to return to a previous state in the application. Were you to do that by default in a single-page application, you'd be returning to where you were before you launched the application, an unsatisfactory experience for the end user. So by implementing routing, we're basically pushing different states of our app onto the history in the browser and being able to take advantage of that. So when I click the back button, I'm going to a previous state as I should in my application, including not just the tabs, but if I went back far enough, even the dynamic search fields. So I can go back from Monte Carlo, which is where I currently am, in hotels, back to restaurants, and back to Toronto. Time permitting, for fun, we have this modern-only application provided for you here. This is an application that tracks the current position of the International Space Station. So what we've done here is provide on the first tab of a tab panel Google Maps display that tracks and animates the current position of the International Space Station with a ping file, with a graphic showing you the tail of the path of the International Space Station that updates every 3 seconds. There's a text field at the top there that when the International Space Station hovers over an area that is recorded by the Google Maps API, it will display the proper name of that location. Otherwise, it'll just give the longitude and the latitude of where it currently is. On the second tab here for passes, this will show, using a model on the individual records, managing the feed provided by an open feed for tracking where their current placement is of the space station. We can provide that information according to the user's current location. So these 5 passes in a 24-hour period reflect where the International Space Station will be in proximity to that end user. So it uses the geolocator to be able to do that. And the model is used to provide that information, not in a timestamp, but in a far more user-friendly way of displaying that information. The Astronauts tab will provide both the information of the current astronauts on the International Space Station, and if an image is available from a different feed, a Wikimedia feed, then we provide an image to correspond with having found that astronaut. So that's a fun one to do to implement just the Modern Toolkit as opposed to Earthquake's classic only toolkit. I hope you've enjoyed this tour of the Sencha training material that we have for XJS. Please feel free to reach out with any questions you may have to training@sencha.com, and we look forward to seeing you in our next class.